All right, let's talk Dallas Cowboys. I'm Nick, and this is our daily Cowboys show. We are inching closer and closer to Week 1 Thursday evening against the Philadelphia Eagles. A lot of news as the Cowboys prepare for that massive matchup to start the season. But as we always like to on this channel, to get things started with a little palate cleanser, a little stat of the day, a little different twist when it comes to today's stat of the day, because we got an update on DaRon Bland's contract extension, courtesy of the folks at Spot Track. They're a great account to follow on Twitter or X. Let's go ahead and pull up the post here. I think it's very interesting. It's just some new information talking about DaRon Bland's extension. It's a 4-year, $90 million base new, $36 million guaranteed at signing, $13 million more March in 2027. 2 years, $36.3 million as a practical deal with $2 million in interception/playoff escalators. Bland's 2025 cap hit increases from $5.4 million to $5.8 million, so essentially flat for this season, his 2025 cap hit. And the thing here that's very interesting, whenever a contract extension or any deal comes out, right, and it makes the headlines, it's always important to wait until guys like Spot Track actually break down the numbers and go into the specifics, because there's some people that looked at the Bland extension immediately and said, oh my goodness gracious, it feels a little bit like overpaying. Now, I highlighted at the time, when you looked at an APY basis, it wasn't top of market, it wasn't resetting the market, it was about 5th or 6th. And this is coming from a guy that in 2023 had an all-time great kind of season, and in 2024 was still a solid corner despite having injuries and all the issues that Dallas had last season. And now we take a deeper look at his contract extension. It is a very team-friendly deal. It's basically a 2-year, $18 million per year, that 2-year, $36 million practical, $36.3 million practical you see on the screen right there. That gives the Cowboys an easy out after 2 years. Again, the guaranteed money at signing, 4 years over a 4-year deal, that's $50 million guaranteed. That's a, in terms of cap hit, if they have to move on, that's not a devastating dead cap hit to hit. No, they're not going to plan to move on, but it's one of those things when you set up these contracts, you always want an out, you always want to have an option to restructure, to move cap dollars around if need be, and that's exactly what the Dallas Cowboys did here. So this is one of the things that the Cowboys actually do pretty well when it comes to their front office. A lot of flexibility in their deals. There's some teams that don't do that very well. Usually, like Cleveland historically was a disaster at it. You look at the Deshaun Watson deal. I'm not saying to compare yourself against Cleveland is ever a good thing, because the Browns have been really bad over the past couple of decades. But there's a little theme in the media that the Cowboys just, they don't know how to negotiate. They're the worst signing team ever. And that's just, again, the massive amount of Cowboys hate. A good team-friendly deal here, locking down a solid player early, right? People always talk about you got to lock them down early. I don't necessarily agree with that, because you lock them down when it's the right time to lock them down, whether it's the day before his contract expires or 2 years before, right? To sit there and say you have to sign every good player early, I think is false. It's not a good thing to do. You look at the Jalen Smith extension, it's a phenomenal example of that. It doesn't always work out. And here I think the Dallas Cowboys did a good job, however, signing and extending a player who's a good quality player, a team guy, right? It's the guy who's played nickel corner, outside corner, doing whatever the team asked of him during training camp, and they did it in a team-friendly manner. Outstanding job by the Cowboys front office. They win the PR, they win the publicity, they get DaRon Bland, they reward him with a lot of guaranteed money. Again, we're talking $50 million guaranteed over the next 2 years. Just immediate cash in his pocket plus game checks, right? That he's going to play this season and next season at least. So he's making tens of millions of dollars. So he's rewarded for his efforts, and they do it in a team-friendly manner that won't destroy their cap hit while also giving them flexibility either way. Good job overall by the Cowboys. All right, let's get into the news. This is very interesting. So this was a post over at Ryan Wood, a Packers beat reporter. And this is very interesting, talking about Kenny Clark here for a little bit. This is Rashawn Gary on losing Kenny Clark, but adding Micah Parsons. Dallas has a great player and leader there, and we've got one hell of a player. So a hell of a player for a hell of a player. Looking at a couple reps that one had today, it's going to be real crazy and scary for teams. Right, so he's going to be complimentary of Parsons, as he should. Parsons is a great player. But it's that first sentence talking about Kenny Clark that I think is very interesting. Dallas has a great player and a leader there. And then he describes Micah Parsons as, we've got one hell of a player. And this is not a Cowboy. This is a Green Bay Packer. This is Rashawn Gary, a veteran, basically highlighting the reason the Cowboys made this trade and why Kenny Clark and his leadership aspects are valued so highly, and is exactly following what I talked about a few days ago about this deal was done, the Parsons deal, not just trading away Parsons, but adding Kenny Clark to follow Coach Schottenheimer's strategy, his theme of being a culture change, an environmental change. similar to 2003 Bill Parcells, that late 80s, early 90s Jimmy Johnson. We don't know if it'll work out to the same level of Johnson or even Parcells, but it's clear that's what the Cowboys are doing here. They're betting all in on shoddy strategy with leadership, high character, high moral, high football IQ kind of guys, right? DaRon Bland gets his extension. It should be a surprise to anyone that, he's a guy that played all the cornerback positions with no complaining whatsoever, all during training camp while undergoing negotiations, potentially hurting his value, right? Nickel corners historically are valued a little less. DaRon Bland getting a lot of nickel reps. Cowboys still get the deal done because, once again, they respect DaRon Bland's leadership and team-first mentality. You listen to Rashawn Gary here. Kenny Clark, great leader and a heck of a player. Parsons is just a heck of a player. What does that tell you, guys? I think it tells you everything you need to know about why Kenny Clark was added to the Dallas Cowboys and the direction the Cowboys under Schottenheimer are going this season and really going forward. They're talking about a new culture, new environment, meritocracy, all of the things we've discussed over the past week or so. Again, I don't know if it'll result in more wins or less wins. We'll have to wait and see. It'll take more than 2025 or frankly even 2026 because you traded all those draft picks. You have that extra cap space. It'll take time for whatever happens here with the addition of Kenny Clark and all of Schottenheimer's strategies to come to fruition. But it's very clear there's a seismic shift in the Cowboys' approach here under Schottenheimer, and they're sticking to it every single step of the way. They follow this process, and you know what? You got to give them credit for consistency, and I think when you're consistent about processes and systems and goals like this, good things tend to happen. All right, moving on to a little bit more information here about Kenny Clark. This is from the Cowboys reporter, Tommy Yarish. Cowboys defensive coordinator Matt Eberflus is excited about being able to have both Kenny Clark and Oso Odighizuwa because they can not only play on first and second down, but on pass rush downs too. Yeah, this is one of those things I think is sort of an interesting aspect of Kenny Clark that a lot of people have kind of forgotten about with the Cowboys, really going back to 2023. The Cowboys were a team that season, right? That was Hankins and Mozzie Smith were defensive linemen in 2024, all the debacles they had at one technique position, where they had like a first or second down nose tackle, and then they swapped them out whenever they could for a pass rushing situation on long yardage downs. And it created this really weird environment. I always say if you have guys that are dedicated run stoppers or pass rush specialists only, you don't want to have to play them a lot because you put yourself in a bad situation, right? Because you have to guess, right? It could be 2nd and 5. Okay, is that a passing play or is that a running play? Okay, it's 3rd and 4. Okay, is that a running down or is that a passing down? So you're always trying to guess, right? And it's one of those things if you have an elite run stuffer who just is bad against the pass, right? You get some of that sometimes, right? Vince Wilfork, for example, is a guy, formerly of the New England Patriots and Houston Texans, who kind of fit that role. But the reality is the best situation is to have players that can do both, right? You want guys that can play every single down. Oso Odighizuwa is a great pass rusher, one of the best pass rushing defensive tackles in football, and he's okay against the run. I don't want to say he's great. He's certainly not terrible, but he's okay. Kenny Clark is a much better run defender, run fit guy, but also very good rushing the passer. So the Cowboys now have their 2 starting defensive tackles for the first time in years that can play 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and if need be, 4th down together on the field at the same time. It doesn't mean they necessarily will all of the time, but it gives the Cowboys the ability to just line up and play and not have to worry about constant sub packages moving in and out. And I thought that was a big weakness, even going back to 2023. And we saw it at times in the games against the Buffalo Bills and against the San Francisco 49ers, where teams they'd run the football just at will against the Cowboys when the Cowboys had a certain personnel package. And once teams realized that the Cowboys, especially in 2023, when they had, of course, the Marquise Bell playing linebacker, even though he's a safety, right? They just became teams could just run at them at will, right? It just became unstoppable. And you can't play Hankins every single snap or whoever's your defensive tackle. Because one, he wasn't really that good, and certainly in 2024, nobody was that good at defensive tackle in terms of that one technique position. But you can't play them every single down because then teams play action you to death and eviscerate you throwing the football down the field. It just created an easy schematic problem for the opposing offenses to attack. The addition of Kenny Clark, I think, solves that problem. It's sort of an underrated problem that doesn't get enough attention. The fact that the Cowboys basically had 2 separate defensive structures for stopping the run and stopping the pass. Now the Cowboys have 1, and that's a really solid benefit. Don't forget that. I think they're weaker, obviously. I think that's pretty fair to say, stopping the pass rush with Parsons gone, but they're now more balanced. And again, I think that will help them out in the long term. All right, this next report is from Patrick Walker at Voice of the Star, who is a phenomenal follow on Twitter X. I highly recommend you check him out for Cowboys news. He posted there's a distinct possibility Kenny Clark could be fully unleashed by the Cowboys versus the Eagles, all things considered, including being in football shape, chemistry with Oso Odighizuwa, etc. Clark is also picking up the playbook quickly. He's very smart, Eberflus to me. Talking about Kid Clark there being very smart. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much he'll play against Philly at short notice. I think he'll play a lot. I think he'll start. It's one of those things that and this is what I've talked about when it comes to the early part of the season for Dallas, when it comes to injuries and things like that. I've kind of been sticking to this, that I feel like September is going to be rough. But as the season goes on, Kenny Clark gets involved, right? We start seeing people learn the defense, people learn the new offense, right? Trayvon Diggs returns, right? Savon Revel returns, right? You start getting Overshown returns by Thanksgiving. We'll get all of that in a second. Guyton gets back whenever he returns, whether it's week 1 or later, right? When you start getting everyone healthy and everyone gets on the same rhythm, Pickens, Prescott, Lamb, they all kind of figure it out. Once it happens and clicks, they'll be good. The question to me is, when will that take? How long will that take? And I think September will still be kind of a rough month for Dallas. That's my prediction right now. I think they'll pick up steam in the second half of the season, certainly. I still think September will be a little rough, but here's the thing that I think is positive. If September is not rough for Dallas, I think there's a chance to be a very good year for the Cowboys, because all signs indicate, with the injury situation, new schemes, new players, that the first month of the season should be a lot of question marks. If that doesn't happen, then I think the Cowboys are in store, barring some injuries, for a really nice 2025 campaign. I think, again, we're talking about Kenny Clark. Again, another reason to be very excited about him. Everything to a man about commentary. Smart, hardworking, leader. And it's not just Cowboys coaches saying that. Remember, Rashawn Gary, Green Bay Packer, Clark's former teammate, says that. Everyone to a man has nothing but positive things to say about him in terms of what he does production-wise, intelligence, leadership, every single aspect. And this is what Schottenheimer has been going for all the time. We want complete football players. We want smart guys, hardworking guys. Not that Parsons wasn't smart. He was very smart. That he wasn't hardworking. He did work very hard. But in terms of what Schottenheimer was trying to do culturally, he's trying to build a team that's basically a lot of Kenny Clark's, if we're being totally honest, right? A lot of other players too are good examples, but just to use a Clark example, he is a prototypical player that Schottenheimer wants his team to be built around. And I think that's why it's starting to look more and more like a great addition. Obviously, the trade and the draft picks in the cap space, there's a lot of factors, but the addition of Kenny Clark in isolation looks like one of the smartest moves the Cowboys have made in terms of implementing Schottenheimer's culture this entire year, and I think that's a very good sign. All right, talking about guys injured and getting back into the fold, we've got a report here again from @Voice of the Star, Patrick Walker, saying DeMarvion Overshown and Savon Revel continuing their rehab. Overshown has long been moving very well, but I can now say Revel is moving well through his rehab drills too. Revel is confident in his plants and backpedal, showed some great speed and ease in direction change as well. Yeah, it doesn't mean these guys are going to return anytime soon, of course, but the fact that people are starting to move, they're starting to feel better, they're starting to go through the rehab a lot better, it's just another step in the process. And this is one of the things when you talk about the Cowboys this season and why I've been a little bit pessimistic, is that with Micah Parsons gone, their best defensive playmaker, in my opinion, was Overshown, and he's going to miss half the season, maybe more. Right, we'll see how well I think he'll come back full strength. I trust him because how hard he's working, his positive attitude is off the charts. I think he'll come back, whether it's this season or next season, at full strength. Right, I think he'll eventually come back to that defensive playmaking power, but he's going to miss most of the season. Revel was a third-round selection for the Dallas Cowboys, a high-potential player that was, unfortunately, due to injuries, first-round talent fell to the third round. He's the guy that I think, again, 2026 comes back into the fold here, and he's going to be a really good corner. So we've got two key pieces of the defense, right? A quality corner or young corner and one of their best defensive playmakers that's going to miss the majority of the season. And that's not even getting into some of the other injuries. And I know injuries aren't an excuse, and I'm not trying to say they are, but when you look at the structure of the team, most teams go into a season 99% of the time having their core strategy, their core pieces in place. The Cowboys really don't. Their best defensive playmaker, out. Young corner, out. One of their starting corners, veteran guys, out, right? Left tackle is banged up, right? You go across the board here, rookie running back with a lot of expectations, Jadon Blue, a little bit of banged up, right? It's one of these things where, again, it's not an excuse, right? Depth in corner in general, right? A little low in terms of injuries. It's certainly not an excuse, but the reality is the Cowboys are heading into September with some injuries, right? And a lot of other teams, frankly, are not at this point. And I think that's, again, why I think September and maybe even a little bit in October could be a little rough for Dallas. But I think 2025 in general, I think will be a mixed bag. I said it, they're 8 to 9 wins was sort of my prediction. We'll see how that shakes out. But I think 2026, especially when you get into the cap space and the extra draft picks, and then 2027 is looking really, really good. I mean, this is a team that is building a lot of young talent at multiple levels of the roster. Offensive line, running back room, linebacker core. We look at the cornerback room now, right? This is a team that's building a really good multi-level team. It's going to take a few more years to get there. Again, it feels very 2003, very 1990, but I think the trend right now is very positive for Dallas. I thought in 2023 and 2024, that the Cowboys were basically trying to squeeze a little bit of juice right here before that good team completely ran out, right? 2022 was our championship window, didn't work out. 2023, hey, Prescott, Lamb had all-time great kind of seasons. 2024, try to replicate that, try and squeeze a little bit of juice out of it. It didn't work. Now in 2025, we're in a reset, and right now the reset, my opinion, is going pretty well in terms of setting things up to make another really good team in 26, 27, 28. All right, next story here is from Tommy Ayers talking more about rehab, and this is about Trayvon Diggs and Tyler Guyton. Both practiced during the media viewing period today. Trayvon Diggs was quoted afterwards by multiple sources saying it's a 75 to 80% chance he plays against Philadelphia. Now, I will throw two caveats in there. One, it's always that last 25% that's always the toughest, right? Because it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I can line up, I can backpedal, I can run, but I'm not full speed. Well, if you're not full speed, you can't play, right? It's certainly not at corner. So it's one of those things where, yeah, he's 75, 80% chance of playing, but that last 25% is usually the hardest. So a big caveat there, but it is a good sign. And there's also the gamesmanship aspect of it too, right? The opposition, Philadelphia Eagles, you don't know what the Cowboys are going to line up in as a secondary. So there's a little bit of an advantage there. No, obviously it can become a disadvantage if you have to, pay backups against a good Philadelphia Eagles team, very good Philadelphia Eagles team, of course. So that's not ideal. But when you look at the fact that Diggs, once again, trending in the right direction, that's outstanding. Give a lot of credit to him stepping up, putting in that extra work. Looks like a lot of people thought he was going to be out all of September. Seems like he will be back sometime in September, maybe as early as week 2, which would, again, be good for the Cowboys. And Guyton, again, practicing. Still question mark whether he'll play Thursday or not. It all depends. But again, you talk about at the time, it looked like it was going to be a super severe injury. The fact that he may only miss one game at most is a good sign for Dallas. Again, we're seeing a sort of trend here with the Cowboys. And I know it's early. We haven't seen football yet. And again, we'll talk about the matchup against Philadelphia in a couple later shows this week right before the game. But I really think when you look at the overall direction this season, not this one isolated game, but the overall direction across the board, there's a lot of good stuff here for Dallas. The momentum's in the right direction. I don't know how it'll work out when it comes to wins and losses, but generally speaking, the vibe feels better than what we saw certainly in 2024. In a lot of ways, even in 2023. And like I've said before, 2023 was Prescott and Lamb having a magical season, and DaRon Bland too, of course. Right? It was sort of just a magical, kind of all-time great kind of season with a couple of their stars. 2024 was obviously a debacle. 2025, a little bit better vibes and energy. We'll see how things have to go when the games actually go live, of course, and that'll kind of, I think, bring everyone down to reality a little bit in some ways. But overall, when you just see all these different data points, the trend is certainly good, certainly long-term for the Cowboys. All right, this next report here, again, this is what I highlighted earlier, that Trayvon Diggs put his chances of playing Thursday at 75 to 80%. I did everything today. I did a lot of scout team reps too. I was getting both, he said, and I'm getting more conditioning. I feel good. So Thursday, maybe looking good. I mean, it's one of those things. He says he may play. I mean, you talk about proving the doubters wrong. If he plays Thursday, I mean, if I'm the Cowboys, I know contractually you had to, pull him out that $500,000 workout bonus. But if he does play Thursday, my goodness gracious, what a job by Diggs. A lot of people, again, said October timeframe to play week 1. What an effort by him, getting himself ready, getting himself prepared. So we'll have to see how that all shakes out. But that's, of course, a really good sign for the Cowboys. The fact that Diggs may play Thursday, even if it's just limited reps, on a little bit of a pitch count, I think that'd be a big win for Dallas, of course, and certainly a good sign for him playing more in the future. All right, I thought this was an interesting post courtesy of Joseph Hoyt. Cowboys offensive coordinator Clayton Adams said he gets goosebumps thinking about rookie first-round pick Tyler Booker and the competitor he is heading into his NFL debut against the reigning champions, an obvious tough environment. I know he's going to respond to it. Yeah, Booker's one of those guys that he's sort of kind of under the radar a little bit when you look at the training camp and the preseason process. A lot of that, of course, the Micah Parsons overhang kind of just blunted a lot of the Cowboys' energy and momentum. But when you look at this rookie class for the Cowboys, there are a few question marks, and we want to see how good they are, right? Ezra Raku, right, he flashed during practice, didn't do a whole lot in the preseason games themselves. We'll have to see how he does, of course, when we get into the regular season. I think it'll take a little time for him to figure out what pass rush moves and things like that work for him. I think that potential certainly is there. But when you look at a guy right here in Booker, he's going to be impact player, negatively, positively, either way, for the Cowboys day one by being a starter. And I think there's going to be a few lumps. I think there's going to be a few bumps in the road, but he is a hyper-competitive guy. He's putting in the work. I'm excited to see what he does against Philadelphia in the first few games of the season against some really good defensive fronts. Again, I think there's going to be some issues. There's going to be some lumps. But when you look at this Cowboys offensive line in general, I mean, you just look at the structure. You got Guyton, BB right here, second-year people. You've got, of course, Tyler Smith, who's a younger player in his own right. Terrence Steele's a veteran, but you've got now Booker, a rookie. This is a young group, right? You have a chance here to really have a sort of golden generation. 3 guys that are in their second year or fewer. Tyler Smith's a younger guy in his own right. This is a very young offensive line that's going to be working together and building together. If they can figure it out, if Booker becomes a quality player, if Guyton's able to take a year or two leap coming back from injury, I think we can all agree Cooper Beebe's already a pretty solid player, and Smith, of course, is fantastic. This has a chance to be another great offensive line group for the Dallas Cowboys. And again, it goes back to the point I've been making. The trend is the Cowboys' friend. Linebacking core, young, come together, looks great. Wide receiver core, outstanding, right? Super talented, a lot of great players. Offensive line has a chance to be great. Cornerback room, when you look at Revel, what he could become, DaRon Bland getting signed, ultimate team guy. Diggs, like questioning or putting to bed some of the questions about his work ethic and attitude, right? Defensive line, you got young guys, Nealand, Ezra Raku, Sam Williams, right? We add Houston into the mix, a veteran like Dante Fowler. You suddenly start looking at this group, multiple levels of this team, and say there's a lot of young players. There's a lot of guys with a lot of things to prove. We'll have to see how they shake out. But boy, this is a team that, especially with extra cap space and extra draft picks over the next couple of seasons, could be laced with talent and depth at multiple levels more than any Cowboys team. In fact, in recent memory, the Cowboys have always been top heavy, right, in terms of how they've been structured and how they've had to win games in the past. That one exception may have been 2018, where they had that run with Amari Cooper after the trade, where I felt like they were a well-balanced team. But really, they've been a very top-heavy kind of team for most of the past couple decades. That may be changing, guys. The transition may be occurring where the Cowboys may become more well-balanced. And I don't think it'll happen this year with all these young guys, but give it a couple years, we may be looking at a very, very deep, well-balanced, multiple levels team here with the Dallas Cowboys. All right, let's get into the comments from yesterday. We'll get things started as we always do with member comments. For anyone who's interested in becoming a member, it's a big help to me. It supports the channel. And if you're a member, I will always, 100% of the time, shout out your comments and reply to your comments and reply to them first. If you're a member, there's a link in the description box below. If you're interested in becoming a member, I would really appreciate it. If you're not a member, I'll do my best to get to your comments, but I'm restricted by time, of course. So without further ado, let's get into the member comments from yesterday. This first one is from David Dobbins, 5887. He said, Dak money versus Micah money is a straw man. The market sets the value, and you choose what level you're willing to trade. Super Bowl wins really has nothing to do with it. Dak was worth the money under that very specific scenario, and Micah wasn't, for an entirely different set of circumstances. If people insist on a direct comparison, then how about Dak generated touchdowns in the postseason and got paid? Micah got one whole sack in the postseason and didn't get paid. You're 100 on Micah and about to be shocked to discover the spotlight was on the Blue Star all along. There's a very interesting debate right now when people say, well, Dak Prescott was paid and Micah Parsons wasn't. And I've made this point before that you get paid a lot of times in terms of being the leader and focal point of a franchise for basically 3 things. 1, overall performance and productivity. That's number 1. But number 2, if you're going to be the face of a franchise like the quarterback or like a superstar, how you carry yourself and how you represent yourself really matters. And Micah Parsons down the stretch did not do a good job of that. And I think that really hurt his negotiation power. Dak Prescott, whatever you want to think about Prescott, and he's had his moments in the playoffs. He certainly had his moments in the regular season, right? He's one of those things. His first playoff game, he threw for 300 yards at 3 touchdowns, scored 31 against Green Bay, right? He retired Tom Brady. He's had his duds, right? He had 2 playoff losses against 49ers. I mean, those were duds, right? That 3rd and I think 14 run on 3rd down in Seattle, 17 when they were to help put it away when they were winning 17-14, right? That was an all-time Cowboys playoff moment, to be totally honest, right? Certainly in recent memory. And even though they lost to the Rams the following week, he actually played pretty well. The defense and rushing defense specifically let him down. So Dak Prescott in the clutch moments, mixed bag for sure. But, it hasn't been a disaster. Micah Parsons, he's, again, mixed bag at best for sure. And 1 sack in 4 postseason games. That's small sample size, but there is a little bit of reason to be like, hey, man, if you're worth $50 million, we'd like a little more than 1 sack every 4 games. So I understand the arguments on both sides there. I do think there is an element too, and you kind of like you mentioned here, that there's different circumstances with different negotiations, and the quarterback is treated differently. It just is, right? That's why we break up contracts into quarterback contracts and non-quarterback contracts. The quarterback position, do you bring stability? Are you a leader? Good face of the franchise? All those elements, right? That's far more important than a non-quarterback, right? If you have Micah Parsons on any team, look at the Cleveland Browns. They have Myles Garrett, who's a better player than Micah Parsons, my opinion, right? I've always said that. And the Browns are terrible, right? And it's because their quarterback position is terrible, right? The Raiders have Max Crosby, a great edge rusher in his own right. They've been terrible for a while. They're hoping to be better this year. Why? Because their quarterback position has been terrible. Quarterback's just more important. You would rather be average at quarterback than phenomenal at defensive end, right? That's why it's, again, apples to oranges to look at the quarterback deal and edge rusher deal. I agree with you there. All right, this next comment is from Robert Bass, 3667. He said, Nick, we want a decent/good running game, but you think our offensive power will rest in our passing attack? That seems to be what we heard from Dak when speaking about how the Cowboys need to play the first game against the Eagles. A fast start, putting a lot of points on the board so we don't get killed trying to shut down Barkley for 60 minutes. Well, yeah, the strength of this offense will be the passing attack, which makes sense, right? You have a first-team All-Pro, superstar, elite superstar receiver in CeeDee Lamb. You got a veteran quarterback that's had some moments of MVP, level performance, like in 2023. You've got a really great 1B or number 2 in Pickens, however you want to describe him, who's an athletic phenom, could win 50-50 balls down the field, yards after catch. You got like a Weapon X kind of guy in Turpin, who's going to be utilized a lot of different ways. You've got a tight end in Ferguson, who in 2023 was a stud. 2024 took a step back. Certainly has that potential. And then you go around and look and say, oh, okay, you got Jalen Tolbert as a wide receiver 4. He's not a terrible wide receiver 4, right? He's caught, I think, 7 touchdowns last season. So the passing game will rely, the offense will rely on the passing game. Protection will be an issue. It makes me feel a little bit back to the season opener in 2021 against the reigning Super Bowl champions Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where the Cowboys passing attack kept the Cowboys in the game. Some great takeaways on defense kept the Cowboys in the game. Ended up falling short, but I think the concept of the entire team for 2021 will be on the passing attack. I think the running game will have its moments here and there, and I do think guys like DaRon Bland and I think Javonte Williams will have to have big moments for this team. But when I look at the strength of this team overall in 2025 specifically, it's going to be Dak Prescott, and you're going to go as far as Prescott will take you, right? That's the way with most teams with their quarterback play. Look, the Buffalo Bills, they're only going to go as far as Josh Allen will take them. The Baltimore Ravens, they're only going to go as far as Lamar Jackson will take them. So that's not the Bengals with Joe Burrow, right? You go down the list, right? The Pittsburgh Steelers with Aaron Rodgers, right? It's a fact, right? You will only go as far as your quarterback will take you. So if Prescott plays really well, the Cowboys could win a lot of games, right? The upside still is there with that passing attack. But I just think right now they're just not as deep as they want to be a true championship contender. I think they'll get there over the next coming years, like I've talked about today. But I think right now I agree with you. The strength of this team, it rests on Prescott's shoulders. It rests on number 4 shoulders. If he plays well, whether it's week 1 or week 18, they have a real chance to win pretty much every game they're in, because there are moments when Prescott has played like an MVP quarterback, and they certainly have the weapons this year to help him achieve that goal. All right, let's get into the non-member comments here. So yesterday I mentioned the Cowboys named their 6 captains, and there was a lot of comments, and I'll highlight one here from Jim Burton, 8978, saying that according to Shoddy's press conference, the players that voted on team captains, head coach thought there would be 3 or 4 captains, but players chose 6. And so a lot of people said, like, oh, because I basically implied, and I think I actually directly said, that Schottenheimer chose the captains. And people said, well, no, the players voted on it. So that's fair, and I appreciate the fact check. I'm just going back to my college days, so this little story, a little anecdotal for you, where the coaches would let us pick team captains. I played small-time college football, Division I AA, if anyone really cares. But at that time, coaches would let us vote on team captains, but there was always this belief that the head coach and the coaching staff had like a golden vote or a veto, right? Where they never actually really looked at the vote tallies themselves. They would see what players got enough votes of guys they liked, and they'd say, oh, here are our captains, right? It was always interesting because the same kind of people always, like the people that coaches wanted to be captains and were really emphasized from their old mind as leaders, would always get picked up as leaders, even if the locker room didn't necessarily feel that way. A lot of times there was alignment, but it wasn't always the case. And I'm not saying Schottenheimer, disobeyed the will of the players or anything like that. I'm just going back on my personal experience, because I remember one year, like as a team, we kind of sort of tested it, where some of the guys on the team voted for kind of like a goofy guy to be a team captain. He was a backup, wasn't a good player really at all. Nice guy, don't get me wrong, but just kind of a goofy, weird guy, not team captain kind of material. And he was not named a team captain when after the votes were tallied by the coaching staff. And a lot of people like then did some polling behind the scenes, say, hey, did you vote for this guy? And there was a lot of evidence that he had actually been voted team captain. He got a lot of votes. And then the coaches decided, nah, we're not going to allow that to happen. So I do think there could be a little golden vote thing here. But thank you for the fact check. Schottenheimer did at least publicly facing say the players selected and voted on their captains. I do think there would be an option for the coaches to veto anybody or promote somebody that they felt should be a team captain that maybe didn't get the votes. So I'm not saying that happened or didn't. I'm just kind of relying on my own personal experience there. So thank you for correcting me, so make sure I'm factually accurate. I just have a little anecdotal experience in my own personal playing career of the coaches having a little bit more say in the captaincy than they'll at least let on. This is a comment from JCD 3869. He said, I so hate to write this, but as I love Demo, I don't see how he can ever get back to his level of performance when both of his knees have been busted up so badly. Totally not his fault. He is tough as nails, but his injury history is so bad. I just don't want to get expectations to be too high. Just being real here as a fan. But to Demo, I can only say best of luck, blessings, and please prove that I'm wrong. It's one of those things where certainly if it was 1995, he would be done. But we live in a different era where these injuries that were supposed to be career-ending right at this point don't really happen, right? People remember Willis McGahee, I think in the 2001, 2002 national championship game for Miami running back, had one of the worst knee injuries of all time, like a devastating knee injury. He went on to have a very long, successful NFL career, right? Massive knee injuries, numerous injuries, doesn't necessarily distribute a career, certainly not today's day and age, right? Happens to a lot of players where they're able to bounce back, and you have to bounce back a hard worker mentality and a great positive mindset. And Overshown has had that in spades, right? So if there's one guy that can do it, it's DeMarvion Overshown. But I agree with you. There is some concern having multiple injuries. But if he can come back, and I think he will be a superstar for the Cowboys defense. I'm certainly counting on it. John Neal 5960 commented, D will be better for one reason. We won't be terrible in run defense. I think this is an interesting debate right now that's happening a lot. And I think even week one against Saquon Barkley in Philadelphia, it will be one small sample size to tell. But I do think it's going to be an interesting concept. I say the Dallas Cowboys, their goal this season, run defense-wise, is to go from god-awful, terrible, which they were last year, one of the worst in football, to just, mediocre, below average. Go from like 30th to 20th, right? Go from 31st to like 21st, right? That's the leap this year because they still need more pieces on the defensive line. They still want another defensive tackle inside. Clark is great. Oso Odighizuwa is solid. But you still probably want one more guy. You look at the linebacker core, it's still very young, right? This is one of these situations where I still think they're a year away from being a good run defense. But I'm excited to see what Eberflus can scheme up, right? I'm excited to see what Clark in the interior defensive line does. I'm excited to see what these young linebackers do, right, against the run. Again, I'm just looking for okay. I'm just looking for mediocre. If they can go from terrible to okay or mediocre, I think it'll be a big step forward. This is from Anthony Harding, 2351. ESPN and Talking Heads just want ratings. That's it. I do not listen to any of those bums who say some of the stupidest things. Micah was looking out for Micah and not the team. Jerry looked out for the team in the long run because there's a salary cap and you can't overpay everybody, especially when you're not winning Super Bowls. There's an interesting element there where, listen, if Micah Parsons is, and look, to his credit, right, if he's fully focused on Micah Parsons and is doing what's best for him, that's certainly his right and his prerogative. I just think when it comes to the Cowboys structuring the team and salary cap, if you don't feel you are winning a Super Bowl with the current roster, you have an obligation to change the roster, right? And it's one of those things I think under Mike McCarthy, especially when they won 12 games in 2021 and certainly repeated it in 2022, and then of course did it again in 2023, even though I felt they were a much weaker team, and I think most people would agree with that. That season, I think the front office was all a little bit stasis, right? It's like, well, Mike McCarthy, the core pieces of this team, good enough to win 12 games. What are you going to do, upset the apple cart? I think Jerry Jones and the Cowboys probably wanted to fire Mike McCarthy of that debacle postseason defeat against Green Bay. But how can you fire someone after 3 straight 12-win seasons, right? And I think when they went 7-10, of course, it made it an easy decision to move on. I think when I look at the Cowboys, I agree with you. And this is the point a lot of people have been making, and I think it's a valid point. If Parsons is on this team, are the Cowboys our Super Bowl contender? No. Are they a Super Bowl contender in 2026? Maybe. But with this extra cap space, with Kenny Clark for a few years, with extra draft picks, are they closer to being a Super Bowl contender? Yeah, because Super Bowl contenders are created by deep rosters, right? Even teams like the 49ers that are very, very top-heavy, right? The 49ers got away with going to the Super Bowl twice because they had a Mr. Irrelevant on a crazy cheap rookie deal, right? That just doesn't happen, guys. You don't get that, I don't want to say lucky. I'm give the 49ers some credit, but you don't get that lucky, right? If you have any sort of high level quarterback play at all, it's going to be expensive. In that case, if you're top heavy, you're just not going to have a well-balanced roster. The Cowboys have an opportunity here to get younger, talented players across multiple levels of the football. They've already got it, linebacker core, offensive line. I think there's some great pieces in the cornerback room, even up front in the front four with Ezraku, Williams, Nealand, right? There's a lot of potential there, right? And there's going to be 4 first-round picks coming over the next 2 years, plus some cap space. So they're going to be able to lock down all their good players. Already did it with Bland, Ferguson, Tyler Smith coming. Oso Odigizua already locked down. Turpin locked down, right? They've already locked down a lot of really good players. They'll continue to be able to lock them down, add some core pieces, a lot of draft capital. Again, with Micah Parsons and without those things, are they a Super Bowl contender? They didn't go to the Super Bowl in 21, 22, or 23. So the evidence indicates they weren't. And if you're not a Super Bowl contender, you got to make the change, right? That's just a fact. All right, let's see if we can squeeze one more comment in here. This is an interesting comment here. John Greet-I2JMN. That's an interesting handle there. What about using these 2 picks from Green Bay for Will Anderson and Tyreek Hill? The Dolphins said they're looking to trade Hill, but only for a first. I'm also looking at Anderson because I don't think he's reached Watt, Parsons, or Garrett level yet, but he is young and would add some push to our edge room. Thoughts? I don't think any of those trades will happen. I think Tyreek Hill for a first ain't going to happen. I don't think the Cowboys really need him in terms of having Pickens and Lamb. I think Will Anderson for a first, I would certainly do that. I think the Texans would want a lot more. But I think what you're thinking about is a very interesting concept the Cowboys could have, and that's what the Cowboys now have, and that's optionality, right? With all these first-round picks, 4 first-round picks for the next 2 seasons and extra cap space, if an opportunity presents itself, they can make a deal, right? They can send a first-round, they could trade for a good player, send a first and a third-round pick to a team for a veteran player, a good player. Let's say it's Will Anderson. I mean, that wouldn't be enough for him, but let's say a guy like that becomes available. Hey, first and third for Anderson, give him a massive deal, and there you go. Right, they have that flexibility, and then they still have additional cap space and additional draft capital. Right, it's sort of the opposite of the Packers. When the Packers now don't have cap space or draft capital, so it's all in on them. They have to make it work, or they won't. Right, otherwise it'll be a debacle for them going forward, just because of the structure of the roster. The Cowboys have some flexibility now for the first time in a very long time since Dak Prescott was on a rookie deal, and I think that's an important thing to have. You have to have the ability to make deals, make moves. The Cowboys haven't really had that, really since 21, 22, 23, and 24, didn't really have that. They were so top heavy, so locked in. Guys like Zach Martin, DeMarcus Lawrence, right? They didn't have a lot of draft capital, right? They did Brandon Cooks as a veteran too. They were stuck from a salary cap perspective, paying a lot of money to a lot of guys. They've got more draft capital than they've had in a very long time. They got more salary cap space than they've had in a long time. And they still got a lot of really good players. They still got good quarterback play, all-pro wide receiver, 2 solid corners when healthy, good pass rushing defensive tackle, Odigizua, great young linebacking core, offensive line, everything I mentioned before. They still got a lot of young players. Now they have some optionality and flexibility, and we're trying to rebuild and build a contending team. That's what you need. They didn't have it, and now they do. All right, I think that's enough for today, guys. Again, listen, we're only a couple days away from week 1. We'll talk more about the matchup in the coming days. Excited to see Cowboys potentially returning from injuries. Diggs, Guyton, Revel doing some good things. Can't wait for Overshown to return, hopefully this season around Thanksgiving time frame. We'll see you guys tomorrow, though. I'm Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection.